I really want to wish everybody a super good morning. A thank you for starting your day out with us. I am Andrea Heberlein. I'm the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Early Learning Investment Commission. I also, before we jump right in, I definitely want to thank our sponsors this morning who helped bring our keynote speaker in, provide some refreshments, and really support this morning's activities. So thank you to Duolingo, the Arthur J. and Lee R. Glatfelter Foundation, and the York County Economic Alliance. We couldn't do it without you. And as a commission of business leaders, the Early Learning Investment Commission is grounded in the spectrum of economic outcomes that are driven by quality childcare for Pennsylvania's families, employers, to our communities and our place in global competitiveness. As we will hear today from many lenses, we really are missing out on significant economic opportunities by allowing Pennsylvania's childcare system to continue to fall apart by not investing in the very core of who provides the reliable and quality childcare that our labor force and our employers depend on, and that's the childcare workforce. And so it is my pleasure to introduce 4 members of the General Assembly who deeply understand the economic role childcare plays across the Commonwealth. Please help me welcome the co-chairs of Pennsylvania's Early Childhood Education Caucus, Senator Judy Schwenk, Representative Shelby Labs, Senator Pat Stefano, and Representative Pat Harkins. And I would love to hand this off to Senator Schwenk.
Good morning, everyone. I am so thrilled to see you. This meeting has been long in process in terms of making it happen. And I'm so excited the fact that we have finally brought together, both as co-sponsors of a meeting, both the legislature as well as the business community, to talk about an issue that we all care so deeply about, which is how our early learning, childhood care, how all of that gets to be resolved in the Commonwealth. I think we all understand what the problems are and what we need to do. And I feel very, very positive this year, based not only on what we're doing here today, but what has been happening behind the scenes and all the work that you've done, that we're going to really be able to make something happen to move over the mountaintop in terms of our support for early learning in the Commonwealth. We all have great work to do, and I'm looking forward to this morning. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Senator Pat Stefano, representing Fayette, Somerset, and Bedford counties, but I come from the business world. As a member of 4 different chambers and president of the Fayette Chamber, I've actually worked on both sides of this issue. And something we've talked about for years and years and years, knowing what the problem I had 4 children I raised. We had the same issue. But now we sit together, we've talked about this. We know what the problem is. We know where the shortages are, and we're working on the workforce, as we said, behind the workforce. But you can imagine now that we're all together, if we can leverage our public dollars and our private dollars together, we can and align ourselves, because we're all coming in from different directions, but if we work together, and I'm starting to feel this synergy coming together. If we do that, I think we can solve a lot of this problem, and we can get our workforce ready to teach our young ones, and we can get them in the classroom early, get their parents to work. Now we have a future generation coming up. They learn faster than I ever can, and I wish I could go back and learn like 4 different languages, because I could remember them. I can't remember anything anymore. So I think this is all important, and I'm feeling a lot of excitement coming together. So welcome to hear more information today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senators. We really appreciate your support and your leadership. And I am also really excited that we are just rolling right along because I am very pleased to introduce Dr. Kathryn Edwards. Dr. Edwards is an economic policy consultant who studies labor markets and public programs, including the intersection of childcare policy and employment outcomes. And Dr. Edwards has been to Pennsylvania several times under the invitation of the Early Learning Investment Commission, and I am very pleased to have her back to share her insight when it comes to the economics that is definitely driven by quality childcare.
Hi, y'all. Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. So no doubt, for many of you, childcare as you know it comes from your experience as a parent or provider, or for the parent and providers that make up your customers, your staff, or your constituents. I'm here this morning to offer my lens as an economist, which is admittedly artless and analytic, an assessment of the childcare system from the standards of economic growth, economic efficiency, and economic loss. So let's start with the basics. The current delivery of childcare occurs in a private market in which the custodial care of children younger than 6 is sold at a price. It is a categorical market failure. It has both two hallmarks of market failure and the key defining feature. The first hallmark is scarcity or insufficient supply. There are simply not enough childcare spots for the parents who want them. The second hallmark is high prices. The market clearing price for childcare is above what many families can afford or comfortably afford. Now, I say that these are characteristics because scarce and pricey describes a lot of things in our economy. Oceanfront property, Taylor Swift tickets. I gave this talk in New York and I said Birkin bags. Maine lobster. But what makes being scarce and pricey a market failure is that being hard to find and hard to pay for has deleterious consequences on the rest of the economy. So it doesn't matter to you, it doesn't affect you in the slightest if I don't have a beachfront property, right? You are unaffected if I don't go see Taylor Swift in person, or if I've never had Maine lobster, which is true because I'm from the Gulf Coast. And I'm like, well, I got shrimp and catfish, I don't need it, right? But like, I might not be happy that I've never had Maine lobster or own a beach house or see Taylor Swift, but it doesn't affect you. It doesn't affect our economy. It makes me a little less happy, but all of you are fine. But if I can't afford childcare, that absolutely affects you. It affects all of us because it puts a curb on economic growth and it generates an economic loss. Now, economists have come up with such a great name for this. It's called a negative externality, a phrase that I find so inscrutable, I'm not even sure it sounds bad, but it is bad. And to be clear, the market failure for childcare, it is bad. It does draw down from the economy, and it has 3 negative consequences, 3 channels for making the economy worse. 1, it constrains family budgets, which affects consumption, savings, and investments. So say families pay $1,000 a month for care. That's $12,000 per year rate over 5 years before you can put your kid in kindergarten is $60,000 per child. That is money that does not go to a house down payment, it doesn't go to retirement savings, and it doesn't go to food or utilities or school supplies or shopping or whatever else they want to spend their money on. This accumulates in an economy. So take a back of the envelope estimate. Say that there are 300,000 kids in Pennsylvania currently in paid care, paying an average of $1,000 a month. That's $3.6 billion in care costs that come out of the pocket of families and don't go to other businesses in the economy. 2, childcare's market failure constrains labor force participation. The simplest way to put this is that if you put children somewhere free and safe between the hours of 8:30 and 5:30, their moms will work more and earn more. That is a global result. We've seen it in 100 different ways in 100 different places. If you put kids somewhere safe, their moms can go out and earn more money. Conversely, the more expensive childcare is, the less likely that their mother will be able to work, and women's overall labor force participation is lower. I'd love to be forward-thinking about the roles of mothers and fathers in our society, but the economics is not so progressive. It's moms. Now, this has multiple channels of limiting the economy. To start, the size of an economy is very well predicted by the number of people working in it. You lose a worker, you lose a small chunk of your economy. You lose 100,000 workers, you lose a 100,000 person-sized chunk of your economy. Family incomes are also predicted by work status. The highest income families are the ones that have 2 workers, followed by ones that have 1, followed by ones that have 0. So you lose a worker, you lose income, you lose enough income, you're eligible for public programs. And I should point out that given that this is borne by mothers, it's important to remember that men and women do not hold the same jobs in our labor markets. And by extension, neither do mothers and fathers. In fact, the 2 occupations with the highest number of mothers, as well as the highest share of mothers within their ranks, are nurses and teachers. 2 occupations that any locality would be ill-afford to lose. Now 3, the final result of childcare being a market failure on the economy, that as a result of care being sold, mother's education predicts the quality of early childhood care and education almost perfectly. No doubt many of you have long had opinions about what type of care setting is best for children. In a center, with a home-based provider, in their own home, with their parent. In the US, it doesn't matter. Whatever the setting, children with highly educated mothers will get the highest quality care and education no matter where they are. They can buy the best wherever they are shopping, and if they can't buy it, they provide it themselves. This leads to what I call the inequality imprint. The divide between high and low income, between rich and poor, is imprinted on children by the time they show up to kindergarten. It is called the kindergarten readiness gap, and your mother's education predicts it, in part channeled through your early childhood education experiences. These 3 economic costs, and how families allocate their budget, and how mothers work, and the quality of early childcare and education, they map perfectly into the economic benefits left on the table until this market failure is addressed. So if the market failure of childcare eats out-of-pocket spending for families, addressing that failure gives families more purchasing power in the economy. On average, families spend about 1/4 of their income on care. If the market failure for childcare pushes workers out of the labor force, addressing that failure brings them back. Now, I'm a labor economist, and when you're a hammer, whole world's a nail. So take it with a grain of salt when I say, in my opinion, this is the biggest result. But were you to add women to the labor force and allow them to maximize how much money that they can get for their families, the effect can be quite considerable. The city of New Haven began providing universal pre-K in the late 1990s, but of course they didn't have enough spots, so they had to lottery who was able to access it. Economist studied the earnings of parents whose kid was given access to free full-day pre-K in New Haven. Now remember, this is going to affect a lot of parents who weren't purchasing it already. They were drawn into the system by the free nature of universal pre-K. And what the economists found was that they got a 21% raise if their kid was brought into universal pre-K. It came out to about $6,500 of earnings a year, and that this lasted for 6 years after pre-K. Because the labor market isn't a point-in-time assessment of how productive you were on a Friday and how much you get paid on a Friday. It is accumulating consequences of your attachment and your decisions in your job and your career. So that means that being able to be attached to the workforce has greater dividends the more years you can do it. So if the market failure of childcare leads to unequal early childhood experiences, essentially free childcare is putting your thumb on the scale for low and middle income children. This won't level inequality, it's not a cure, but it's an arrow in the quiver that we've chosen not to use, and one that, much like the earnings of parents, has accumulating consequences for children. I'm sure most elementary school teachers could tell you which of their students weren't prepared for kindergarten and how that affects them by 5th grade. Of course, this leads to the biggest question of them all. If all of these benefits come down to addressing market failure, how can we address it? What do we need to do? With perfect frankness, it will take public intervention from lawmakers like those in the room. There is no market solution coming. Childcare is immune to market solutions. There's no miracle technology waiting to be invented. There's no leap in the efficiency of childcare delivery that will suddenly change the calculus and make it cheaper to provide. There's no assembly line. There's no artificial intelligence. There's no clever management system that will suddenly make it cheap and easy to provide childcare. Little children need the eyes, ears, hands, and attention of a capable adult. That won't change. Childcare cannot get cheaper. There is no way the private market will either become more plentiful or more affordable. Full stop. You don't have the power to change this with the market alone. There is no ability for it to change course and its current deterioration. The future of market-based childcare is more expensive, serving fewer children. And if I had said that in 1990, I would have been proven right today. So logic dictates an economic lesson that perhaps policymakers are reluctant to hear. The government needs to step in. It's the only way childcare will change. In fact, it is the only solution, and it's not a matter of if it's what the government needs to do, but when they will finally do it. I want to end by pointing out two failed solutions, one that comes from the market and one that comes from policymakers. Over the past 30 years, childcare costs have increased more than housing, food, energy, medical care, and even prescription drugs. In total, since 1990, childcare prices have increased 263%. That's double overall inflation. Even since the pandemic, when we had our own bout of inflation, prices for childcare have averaged 5% a year for the past 3, 5% a year annual growth for the past 3, even as prices in the economy normalized to 2.5%. The market has fought the inexorable force of childcare price increases with low wages. Labor is the biggest cost for childcare providers, and attempts to curb tuition growth come at the cost of wage growth. And yet the result is to not only completely fail to curb price growth, it has resulted in a workforce that is grossly underpaid, that cannot compete for the highest paid workers, and that struggles with retention and recruiting. So I was looking at the Bureau of Labor Statistics data on hourly wages in Pennsylvania, and I saw that according to their estimates, a child care worker in Pennsylvania made an hourly wage of $14.19 an hour. That's just above the going hourly rate for manicurist of $13.55, but it's just below bellhops at $15.33, well below telemarketers at $17.14, janitors at $17.53, and even house cleaners at $16.03. And of course, it's nearly $10 short of exercise trainers and group fitness instructors who make an average of $22.50 per hour in Pennsylvania. If the thought was that if we just keep wages low, if we pay the people who mind our children in early child care less than we pay people who clean our houses, somehow we will be able to bend this market failure and prevent price increases, we have been proven catastrophically wrong. And the result is an existential problem for many providers who cannot expand without more staff and yet struggle to find them to simply stay open. This accelerates scarcity and hence is the snake eating its own tail of market failure. Policymakers of late have been tempted by embracing a reduction in safety standards through laxer staffing ratios, qualifications, or even age of the child care worker. I will remind you of my earlier point, that the strongest predictor of early childhood care and education quality is the mother's education. Please do not hold any illusion that if you knock down the floor of safety standards, this will affect anyone other than the lowest income children, that you are codifying into law that people who have less deserve less, even if they are too. And it will be for nothing. Nothing. You will not bend the curve of market failure, even if you sacrifice safety. We learned that when we sacrifice wages. It does not unlock economic rewards for family budgets, for labor force participation, and it certainly doesn't counter the inequality that children already experience in this profit-based system. And in exchange, you will find yourself in this building with the exact same problem of unaffordable and inaccessible childcare that harms your economy and limits your economic potential within 2 legislative sessions, if not 1. I don't mean to be unsympathetic. I know that childcare is expensive. Of course, I have a parent with 2 kids in care, but I'm trying to be coldly realistic of your options going forward. The extent of market failure ties your hands as much as it ties the hands of so many families, providers, and children's. The only meaningful change to improve childcare will come from public intervention. You can fight it, you can ignore it, but you cannot change it. So where do you start? The critical question is the policy in service of fighting market failure and its consequences? So long as the answer is yes, you are starting in the right place. Short of a full market takeover, which no single state can afford other than ones that have high mineral deposits in the West, you have to start somewhere. And the U.S. market for childcare is so uniquely bad, with no complete transition in any locality to free childcare, we don't have a preferred route out of where we are. What I will say is that as much as I have talked about prices, they're arguably a terrible place to start. Well, for one, this sounds obvious, it's expensive. So consider that if you gave $1,000 to every parent, or $1,000 per kid to reduce their child care bill, if you have 300,000 kids in care, that's $300 million gone. And because of the way that market works, if you gave every parent $1,000 to help them afford care, I can guarantee you the price of child care will increase by $1,000. And providers will capture that market. You're in effect sending money to providers, but do it ineffectually through families rather than going to providers directly. As hard as it is for me to hear as a parent, it actually doesn't benefit the market much to help me first. It benefits the market more to help providers first. So, that said, in designing policy to go directly to providers rather than end up there through market capture, you gain the ability to dictate terms. Now, I know that your governor has proposed a pay increase for workers through state spending of around $1,000. The advantage of having that money directly targeted to workers is that you get to decide where it goes and on what terms, being able to control the result within your purview. You have the ability to do that as policymakers. And $1,000 may not sound like a lot, but if you're making $14 an hour, that could be as much as a 3.5% raise a year. They don't get statutory COLA increases. You're barely making up for the price gains that we've all seen. So I would not get discouraged by the problem ahead of you. It is one that every state and locality in America is facing. Please don't lose sight of what children, workers, family, and the economy has to gain. The more you dig into what you have to change, the farther away the goals can feel. But beating back the effects of deep economic inequality, adding workers to the economy, increasing income for families, decreasing the budget constraint of families, these are worth more than your time and effort. And I appreciate the work that you do and how much harder your job is than mine. Thank you.
Kathryn, thank you so much. And we are fortunate that we also have some time for some comments, questions. So I would love to open it up to the floor, but I think if you don't mind giving people a chance to think, I'm going to start with one question for Kathryn. You know, you are absolutely right. We have a big ask on the table, $55 million recruitment and retention. There are a lot of conflicting priorities in state government. This is a tight budget year. We hear that over and over. For those in the room and who are fiscally very conservative and really trying to figure out what's the best way to invest limited dollars, like what would be, you've kind of underscored this in your talking points, but what would be some of those key points that we could use to really make the deep case that this is a wise investment right now for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Wow, no pressure. Make the succinct fiscal case. Yeah, I mean, the biggest fiscal cost you have is the number of workers you've lost who aren't paying taxes. So you're chipping away at a much larger problem of the money that comes in the door. And that starts with something as small as how many unfilled child care spots do you have filled? That's about the number of people you might not have working because of childcare constraints. And so while you see the dollars going out and that's easy to measure, adding 1,000, 3,000, 5,000 workers to your economy, 5,000 income taxpayers to your base, that's not trivial. And that money has a return, but it will not come to you for free. And the longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. Again, I said my job was not as hard as yours, so I want to reiterate that these types of choices and priorities are difficult, but I actually appreciated a lot of what the governor has proposed here because it's it starts with the administrative task. Can you get money to child care workers? Let's answer that question. Is this possible to get out the door? We're going to give them an amount of money that might not seem like it's life-changing or economy-changing or grand in scope, but you're basically taking a very conservative path through a measured policy and testing if it works before you increase it. I thought it was quite appropriate, given Pennsylvania's economy, that this was a reasonable policy. Some places, they are swinging for the fences, and they ran out of money a year later. Oh, yeah.
Thanks for your presentation today, Dr. Edwards. You spoke of 263% increase in cost to the providers or for child care. Do you have any background as to what is driving that cost?
Sure. So that was from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Consumer Price Index, that gives you not only overall inflation price increases, which we all unfortunately had to get educated on over the past few years, but breaks down every price down to the line item. So you can compare childcare spending with money that you spend at like a movie theater, right? At every line item. So I merely calculated the cumulative increase in the price of childcare from 1990. And the biggest driver of prices is wages. I mean, it's a labor-intensive good. There's no shift to a cheaper machine for a child care provider. It's just they have to have people in the room in order to keep kids safe. And it's very much on trend with every labor-intensive industry. The more people you need, the more expensive it is. Another example is education. Also gets hit with the cost are going up even as the wages are coming lower. And same thing with people who work in hospitals and elder care facilities. In the back.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for your presentation. Really enlightening. I was a former music teacher for nearly 4 decades. And what the doctor talked about is an investment that is going to be worth it. And what I'm about to say is that as a former teacher, you could tell when the children came in your class what children came from a house that nurtured them and what kids came from nothing. And the other part of the cost that I want to share with you is the children are our future. And if we can get them young enough and teach them properly, it takes away the cost in elementary school, in junior high, and in senior high, because you've given them a good solid base, not only educationally, but socially, everything about that. And I don't know whether you have any numbers on this, but for the folks that would be benefiting from this, the mothers and fathers would be benefiting from this program, did you run any numbers relative to them paying part of the cost to help eliminate some of the total cost? And I say that because they have a stake in this. It's their children. It's costing them $300 a week now. Could they afford $50 a week? And how would that money affect the overall success or failure of the program? Thank you.
Absolutely. So how to charge parents as users is really a question for a new system and not the current one. When you move there incrementally, the market captures all the aid you give parents and puts it right back in price increases because you're giving more money to people who have to pay for a price. So in that market, they'll just eat it. I mean, this is why electric car subsidies increase the price of the car by the exact amount of the subsidy. I mean, I still bought one, but I wasn't under the illusion that I was saving $7,000. I knew exactly what was happening. So if you are working from a market clearing price, any help to parents ends up getting eaten by the market. if you were in a system in which we've moved to a reimbursement model, in which rather than sell care, providers are reimbursed by the state for the care they provide, then you can come up with the parent copay and user fee, and you can base that on income, or you come up, Canada has a flat rate, $10 per day, that's waived for people who are on public programs. Germany has an income-based rate that's set a couple years in advance, and it could be up to a few $100s or free. But that type of pricing structure only makes sense when you've eaten the market. So I will say that it does accelerate the decline of the market for 0 to 3. So you provide pre-3 and pre-4 in the public school system, you knock down kindergarten. This is a great investment, and it has amazing returns. Lots of localities are pursuing this. But of course, if you take the cheapest kids to care for out of the private market is left only with infants and toddlers, the most expensive to provide care for. The District of Columbia learned this lesson a very hard way. It has universal pre-3 and pre-4 in the public school system, and the price of 0 to 3 care exploded. So if you do this, it's not just a matter of taking off one kid at a time, and then one age goes to public school, and another age goes to public school. You will be left with a market that's even more expensive, and DC has had to move heaven and earth to make those prices lower, increase subsidies for families. They have the largest pay equity fund for teachers in the country, and I think they're learning that there are more expensive ways to do this. My kid was in 2 years of free preschool, and it was one of the greatest gifts to my family I could possibly receive. Price for childcare in DC runs around $2,200 a month. So, it saves me. I don't like to say the number because then I'll have to know that it's true of how much money I paid for care, and that's a hard number. But they have had problems with that, and it's a problem that a lot of localities face, that if you expand pre-3 and pre-4, you have to aggressively subsidize 0 to 3 on the provider side. And if you don't do them in tandem, the market will eat you. Yes?
Thank you. We've approached this as a state. In addition to subsidies, we've looked at a business tax credit, which is coming online this year, as well as a tax credit to parents. How does that fit into the solution? Or not?
It's assistance without changing the fundamentals, is what I would say. It's helping people. It's recognizing that we are in a very difficult state, but it will not change the fundamentals, which is not a nice answer. I think on the tax credit side in particular, what we know about tax credits is that unless you've made it fully refundable, you're subsidizing middle and high income families. Who do have the highest ability to pay. I mean, I can cry to all of you of how much I paid for childcare, but the truth is I'm a highly educated rich woman. I could afford it. And I didn't like affording it. I didn't like how much money I spent on it, but it's not like my kids went hungry. I actually saw your hand first, but then I need to move to this side of the room. Yeah, well, private equity isn't looking for something for nothing, right? If it's part of their business line, it's a business proposition, and the evidence of private equity and social services is not good. What I would say is 2 words of warning, but they're actually whole sentences. 1, private equity hasn't been through a recession, right? The private equity flourished after the financial crisis and the restrictions on securities reportings for publicly traded companies. You started to have more privately traded companies like private equity. It limited the number of public companies we have in our country. It's never been lower, right? We don't see IPOs the way we used to. They go to private equity. Well, they have rather inscrutable bottom lines. They have complex debt structures, and they've never been through a recession. So that's part 1. Part 2 is when an earlier private equity company in Australia went through a recession in 2008, they took down 1/3 of the childcare system that was concentrated in one private equity company. I think it was called ABC Learning. and the government had to step in, take over, and convert it to nonprofits. So I think you just have to know that the more private equity is amongst your care providers, we think it's about 10% nationally, you have to assume that at least 10% of your spots are at risk in economic disaster, in economic crises, of collapse, and that the government will have to step in. So why are you letting them make so much money off of children when you're going to have to rescue them anyway, is a fair question. They would obviously not put it that way. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, I can pass on my remarks. I'll edit out the jokes so I don't sound quite as silly. Yes, you, sir.
Good morning, and thank you again, Doctor, for your presentation. It was sobering, but that's what we need to hear. And I'm Representative Justin Fleming. I represent the 105th District here in Dauphin County, and I believe I'm the only member of the General Assembly who was a child advocate. So I came into this body talking exactly about these issues to Representative Harkins, to Senator Schwenk, to Senator Stefano. And I just want to illuminate something. You're right. You're exactly right. We do need government intervention, and it's long overdue. I just want to remind everybody, and I don't believe that government can solve every problem, nor should we. But the magnitude of providing high-quality child care and pre-K is almost beyond our scope. But I would like to remind everybody that unlike when I started my advocacy in 2011, 2012, we are in a liquid cash position as a Commonwealth. We have $7 billion in our budget stabilization fund. We have $4 billion on our balance sheet. There may be structural issues. There are structural issues coming down the pike. I don't want to minimize that. But let's not sit here and say that we are not capable of solving this problem right now, because it's just not true, or working towards solving this problem right now. So I just want to remind everybody of that. This is not 2011, where we are trying to scrape nickels together as a Commonwealth. We have funding. Let's do something, and we're trying with the tax credits, like Senator Schwenk said, but let's infuse funding into this system before it gets worse and before we run into a situation where there is literally no child care available and parents cannot work because they have to be home raising their children, and that will crush our economy. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, that's right over there.
Sorry, okay. Just to stress the point of the readiness for kindergarten, I know that the school district that I'm in where my daughter is specifically, the readiness has gone down each year over the past several years as the kids are coming into kindergarten. And so the waiting lists in Schuylkill County range anywhere from 2 to 3 years. And so the provider, one that I'm working with directly, she is seeing more and more mental and behavioral issues, and there is a shortage of individuals who are able to help her and these children. And so my daughter's in first grade, and I was able to see firsthand in kindergarten. It was very apparent who had childcare before they got to kindergarten, and now we're in first grade. And just yesterday, again, my daughter has come home and said, desks were thrown, chairs were thrown. This is 2 years in a row now. So now the students have to be put in another room until that issue is resolved with the children who were having the mental and behavioral issues. It's increasing more and more, and the education is also being disrupted. So I just wanted to make that point that the readiness is going down.
It's more than just a statistic. Thank you for sharing. Over in the corner.
There we go. Ed Latta, President and CEO, Goodwill Keystone. We're unique in that we're a 501c3 nonprofit focused on workforce development, mental health, reentry, but we're also one of the largest retailers in the Commonwealth with over 42 brick and mortar retail stores. So we're uniquely, this is a kind of core of a lot of the workforce development issues that we feel, not only on the business side, but on the mission delivery side, to the point where, and partly testimonial and then question for the lawmakers in the room, we've had to actually spring up new workforce development programs around how to teach women how to create economy at home because the cost of childcare has become unaccessible. And so, and we've had to spring it up just to respond to market demands and everything that the doctor said. And by the way, also from the Gulf Coast, Maine lobster is, not as spicy mud bugs. But that being said, everything she said was spot on, and in our research at Goodwill, being a 120-year-old organization, there's no better economic driver than empowering women to be able to go to work and do what's right for their families. And so the fact that we feel it in our stores, right, and we pay above Alice wages, but that being said, we still feel the brunt of that as a retailer and also from workforce development standpoint. So my question to the lawmakers, outside of competing interests, what is the biggest, from an advocacy standpoint of those of us in the room that are passionate about this, understand the economic importance, what are the barriers that you all are having in order to really move the needle? Because from our lens, you're looking at economic development, you're looking at competitive advantage for the state of Pennsylvania, all these things that can position us as an opportunity rather than necessarily the doom and gloom that faces us. What are your biggest challenges to be able to push legislation outside of competing interests? Because this seems to be one of those unifying opportunities. So I'm just curious to hear what problems you're facing in the rooms and in your negotiating rooms that maybe we can help you with to get whatever we need over the hump. Thank you.
So I think that wasn't for me. If y'all want to take it, or did one of you have a question for me? And then I think that's my last question.
I guess my question is this, is that we know we have a big fundamental foundational issue, but we also have potential opportunities before us. I look at this right now as we've got 3,000, at least 3,000 openings of caregivers. Do the math, at least 25,000 or more spots for kids. The implications on employment and workforce development. So if you're going to address this, and relative to the $55 million budget right now and what's proposed, my question to you is, and I think you may have alluded to this before, we need to stabilize the system. Is this the proper and appropriate and prioritized place for us to make investment today while we address the bigger issues along the same lines?
Of whether or not you should give workers a pay bump first?
$55 million spent to the providers in order to stabilize
The workforce?
quality care workforce first.
I can see arguments both ways. I think the advantage of giving it directly to workers is that, because the other option is you just give it directly to providers and tell them to spend it on what they want, and most of it would go to wages, but not all of it. I think the advantage is that you guarantee the floor on the worker side, which would help with recruitment and retention, and that if you just gave an empty check, or a blank check, not empty, I'm so sorry. I deal with money, but I don't always talk right. If you gave basically like just a check to providers and said, spend as you will, you have less control over the consequences and how they choose to spend it. And so the trade-offs are just, if there is a goal you want to achieve, you should just achieve that goal. And if you have the ability to design that with your policy, you can guarantee that your goal is met, as opposed to hoping they spend it the way that you want. So I think from a policymaker's perspective with limited budget funds, you basically set out the 4 things that you want to do. If you just give a check to providers, you don't know which one they'll do. If you say, all right, part 1, here's $1,000 per worker, raise wages, this should make it easier to recruit and retain. Part 2, here's a, facility fund to help you with rent. That's part 2. You can basically have more control over the money and its consequences, which I imagine for policymakers helps you see what's effective. The danger of untargeted funds is that you have a harder time knowing if it worked. And you run the risk of having so many disparate actions with the receipt of the funds that you don't have the ability to know what it was actually effective at doing. And so you kind of like throw the baby out with the bathwater of like, oh, well, they got this money and we can't see it, but you've designed the money to make it hard to see. So that is the argument for having like clear target, clear goal. It raises wages. We should be able to see it, right? It's a neat, self-contained policy that gives you something to look at and makes it clear that your policy is working. You can test that. And you're stabilized. It's paying workers is not going to be a drop in the bucket if you can help retain people who are doing the job that at, $14, even $15 an hour is very hard to get people to do. And I think that that's my last one, and that I'm turning it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much again to Dr. Edwards and for the insightful questions and comments around the room. And I am now so pleased to have you hear from Pennsylvania's authority on our state child care system, the Deputy Secretary of Pennsylvania's Office of Child Development and Early Learning, Deputy Secretary Shantae Brown.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I have the pleasure, I guess it's the pleasure, of following Dr. Edwards, so bear with me. I absolutely adore her. I could listen to her speak about child care all day. But I am the Deputy Secretary for the Office of Child Development. In a few short statements, I'm going to tell you all why early learning is important to me. Of course, it's not just because I am OCDEL's Deputy Secretary. There are many reasons, but first, I'm a mom. I'm a working mom, like the one that Dr. Edwards talked about or spoke about earlier. Both my husband and I had to work long hours, so alternative care was extremely important to us. It was 20 years ago for me, but I will never forget how confused, worried, and challenged I felt trying to find high-quality care for my most important asset, which is my baby girl. So now I channel those feelings every time I talk to a parent or think about resources for childcare providers and or help to craft early learning policy. It's important to always think about parental engagement and the overall needs of not just children, but also their families. I'm also a Head Start graduate. Yes, I am a direct product of an invaluable early learning program, a program that our state proudly supports. Early on, my mother enrolled her eldest baby girl in a program that not only focused on early learning, but provided nutrition, parental engagement, social services, and health supports to our very small family. I have always been an early learning champion. I love to say that I eat, sleep, and breathe early learning. My first job was in a home child care center or family child care, and I knew from those days that I belonged in an ECE classroom. When I graduated from Temple University with a degree in early childhood education, every single block on my career path has been in this field. I have served as a teacher, an early childhood coach, a coordinator, a pre-K director, and my most recent role prior to this one was the child care licensing director. Listening to child care providers and parents elevating their needs and the needs of young children, ensuring access to quality ECE programs, and keeping children safe, they are my why. But it is also the why for the entire Office of Child Development and Early Learning. We focus on management of both the federal and state child care budget, create policy for our early learning programs, manage early intervention, provide supports and resources for families, and oversee the Commonwealth's 19 early learning resource centers and ensure the health and safety of over 6,000 licensed childcare facilities. So I told you why early learning and childcare are important to Octo. But now I challenge you all to think about why early childhood education is important to you. Are you a parent, a guardian, a caretaker, an aunt, an uncle? Does someone you know have a child? Is someone you know home today due to a sick child or a childcare issue? Have you had to think about childcare options for yourself or your staff or your constituents? If you have said yes to any of these questions, then the topic of early learning, childcare, early childhood, education, regardless of the name, it is indeed important to you as well, and we need to make sure that we continue to make the right investments. The governor's 25-26 budget proposal continues to prioritize childcare and early learning. With additional investments proposed for early intervention and pre-K counts, we are also excited about the proposed appropriation of $55 million for childcare recruitment and retention bonuses. This investment would enable our licensed childcare centers participating in Childcare Works to give their workers recruitment and retention bonuses, and we've heard from a team of childcare workers who wholeheartedly support this initiative. Not only did many mention that this money would be beneficial to them and their families, but also noted that this additional investment will help them pay for their basic living expenses, which many noted was challenging to do, making $13 per hour. Octal is always proud to be able to lead and move this work on behalf of the Commonwealth. As a dual deputate, so yes, we have the pleasure of reporting to both the Department of Human Services and the Department of Education, the Commonwealth's largest departments, we are always ready to move this work for our youngest learners and their families. Thank you for your ongoing dedication, leadership, and partnership in this critical work. We look forward to continued collaboration toward a brighter future for our children and families. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shantae. I have to say, I continue to be so impressed by the way you and your team continue to kind of juggle so many balls in the air to ensure what resources we do have are invested strategically and effectively. So thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your story too. It just shows that we are all vested in this work very deeply. And so I would love to turn the mic over to Jen DeBell. As many of you in the room are aware, much of the child care advocacy work in Pennsylvania is driven by Start Strong PA, which is expertly led by Jen DeBell, Executive Director of PennAC. Jen?
Thanks, Andrea, and good morning, everybody. PennAC and Start Strong PA are working hard to ensure that at a minimum, the Shapiro administration's proposal for $55 million for childcare recruitment and retention makes it into the final budget. In numbers, I'm going to summarize why it's imperative that Pennsylvania make this investment and the strong support which exists for it. First, as Deputy Secretary Brown noted, it's critical that we listen to those most impacted as we seek policy change. Start Strong PA, alongside Octal, held 13 listening tours with child care providers about a year and a half ago. We asked them to think about how they would spend new state funds if it was allotted for child care. And they recommended spending it, and I'll say it was over 83% of those who were involved statewide, that they would increase staff wages because the providers identified that low wages and lack of benefits were driving child care teachers away from the field. We know the average wage from the Independent Fiscal Office is about $15.15 an hour in Pennsylvania, and a survey showed that about 21% of our child care workforce relies on Medicaid for their health coverage and SNAP to put food on their own tables for their kids. In addition to the providers, we also know families will benefit from this investment. A survey of licensed child care providers that Start Strong PA put out demonstrated that about 3,000 unfilled positions were causing over 25,000 children to be shut out of programs. This was just 17% of the licensed capacity who responded, so just think about how much worse those numbers really are statewide. So we know this is going to help working families if we start to invest in our teachers, keep them in the programs, and be able to recruit more. And recognizing the childcare teachers are the workforce behind the workforce, there's over 60 chambers and economic development organizations throughout the Commonwealth, many of whom are with us today, who have called for investments in the childcare workforce to help employers and families in Pennsylvania. And as Dr. Edwards noted, this is a smart investment for Pennsylvania's economy as well. The public also recognizes how important it is to invest in childcare. Susquehanna Polling and Research conducted a poll in March of 700 likely Pennsylvania voters. 83% of PA voters favor allocating state funding to increase wages for childcare workers. In addition to the strong support and demonstrated need, the numbers also show that this investment will work. We've shared a report, we have some copies for you here today, documenting 18 other states that made similar investments and are seeing those investments pay off, being able to recruit teachers and keep teachers in childcare programs. And in addition to those other states, during the pandemic, just wanted to remind everyone, the General Assembly actually appropriated flexible American Rescue Plan dollars to help stabilize childcare programs by providing staff recruitment and retention bonuses. At the time, it was only a one-time payment. We're trying to fix that now and make it a permanent one. And the Office of Child Development and Early Learning successfully drove out $90 million at that time to childcare providers, demonstrating their readiness to operationalize this proposal from the governor. As the Deputy Secretary said, if we don't invest in our teachers, we risk continuing to lose them, and that will have further negative impacts on our children and working families. The most important factor in quality programming are our teachers and the relationships that they develop with the children in their care. Children's brains develop faster from birth to 5 more than any other time in their lives. Our youngest children are not just learning the basics to get ready for school, but are also learning the executive function skills that make for successful people long-term. Self-regulation, following directions, treating others appropriately, sharing. These teachers are building brains and maximizing a critical point in brain development. So it's time that we start to invest in them for the critical work that they do every day for our kids. The numbers tell the story, but we need to add a new one, and that's making sure that at least $55 million ends up in the budget for childcare recruitment and retention. So for the members in the room, I strongly encourage you to co-sponsor the legislation that's going to be coming out. Senators Lindsey Williams and Senator Schwank are going to be introducing it in the Senate, and Representative McNeil, I think she had to go, who was here earlier, she's introducing the legislation in the House to make this a reality. And for others in the room, please continue to join us for, to call on the General Assembly and make sure that this ends up in the final budget. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you so much, Jen. I'd also like to say good morning to Representative Pat Harkins. Hi, Pat.
Good morning, everyone.
Would
Great dialogue. I apologize, I was a few minutes late. Traffic was very heavy coming in for those who were coming the way I was. Great dialogue, like I said, and to the gentleman's question on how we approach these issues. I founded the Pre-K Caucus 19 years ago. I've been a member for 19 years. Strong advocate with this guy in the front row. But it's a challenge because you have many well-intentioned people who are senators and representatives that have that passion for it, but they're not aware of the depth of the issues that we're facing. Once we bring this to light to them, it's a different story, but you have a new crop of members come in and you're trying to train them or explain to them how the process works, how the budget process is enacted, and the critical parts that they play in that. I always tell everybody in my district, I go and I read to the school children reading week and things like that, but also get to see your schools, both public and private, homeschool, everybody. If you can get to people that way the representative, the senator, knows the key ingredients in their districts, and when they come here, they're a little more prepared and they're better off as far as knowing how to approach the administration, the governor, people like that. We have to come together more as a unified group and realize that, like Jen said, we're building brains. I've always said that. The investment that we make today is going to unfold in a huge way down the road. So keep doing what you're doing, but we really need to educate our members as well as the general public. people hear that we don't want to raise taxes. That's the mantra, that's the cry. And with the uncertainty from the federal level at this point, we're going to prepare a budget for one budget with the federal cuts and one budget without. God help us in 6 months what we may be facing. It's not a promising outlook as far as I can see. I'll leave it at that. If anybody has any questions, I'm easy to get a hold of. Glad to work with anybody in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. And Senator Schwank?
Thank you, and this has been an excellent learning session. You know, for us as legislators, instead of just pontificating, to actually be educated on what some of the issues are and to hear from you, and that's the key point, and I think that the representative actually got to that to a certain extent. Know what's happening in your community. Sitting right next to you is a gentleman who, along with his wife, Mr. Brad Hall, helped to spur a program in Berks County where we were not only subsidizing the salaries of child care workers, in addition to that, we were able to mentor young women who had children in daycare so that they could become, could get an associate degree and be able to, learn and build a career for themselves in child care. Find out those stories that are happening, and the United Way was a part of this as well as some state funding helped to make this happen. And I think it's a great model. That's what we've got to learn and we've got to spread in this room. What are the models that we need to speak to our fellow legislators as well as people in the community so that they can advocate effectively for what needs to be done? Good news is the very fact that this $55 million is in the budget is a big lift, a big leg up in terms of helping to make this happen. Won't be that hard, I believe, if we can tell the story. So there's lots you can do. Reach out to your legislators, tell them what's happening in your community, both the problems and the successes. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And yes, and I would definitely love to underscore that there are so many pockets of innovation where communities, counties, employers are really embracing this opportunity to blend public and private efforts together. It is a really strong core that we believe at the Early Learning Investment Commission can be like dominoes, right? To really accent the public dollars that we do receive. And we look forward to strategizing together. And part of that is my gratitude to the co-chairs of the Early Learning Investment Commission, Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis and Jim Hone, who is the Central PA Regional President for PNC Bank. And so I am so pleased to hand it over to Jim to kind of close us out.
Well, thank you all for being here today. Obviously, you're here because you believe the issue and you believe in our children. We've got the 55 million initiative before us. I've got a whole bunch of notes here, but I'm just going to, in order of time, I'm going to try to get this quickly through here, is that we know about the kids, we know about working collaboratively together to come up with solutions. We've got the 55 million budget proposal in front of us right now. I think one of the keys is this is not a left-right. This is a help the kids. This is help the business community. This is help the economy of Pennsylvania. This is ultimately helping the revenue source of Pennsylvania. It is the workforce of today, as we heard so eloquently about labor force participation. It's also our qualified labor force 20 years down the road. This makes all the sense in the world. I sit in this chair because I believe in helping kids and helping the economy of the Commonwealth. You know, at PNC, we've invested like $500 million in our Grow Up Great initiative to help narrow this kindergarten gap that Dr. Edwards talked about. Each one of you has your own story of success and commitment. I just ask at this point forward is raise your voice, advocate, talk to as many legislators, talk to your friends in terms of getting this over the hump. For the chambers, thank you so much. 60 different chambers signed on. So this isn't a health and human services. This is not an economic development. It is both. I think we all know and want the end state is that we're going to have to continue to come together to talk about the ideas of the pathway to get there. Because we know this needs to be done. We know this is a crisis. And this 55 million will help stabilize the workforce right now of a broken system to help triage, put the Band-Aid on while we look at this longer-term fix. Andrea, thank you so much for your leadership. To our legislators who have taken their leadership, thank you so much. And I just ask that everybody have a voice in this. We can make this happen. So thank you so much for being here. I also would like to thank our sponsors, once again, Duolingo, the Arthur J. and Lee R. Gladfelder Foundation, and the York Economic Alliance for sponsoring today's event. And thank you once again for your leadership on this important initiative.